Motivation always fades, usually right when you need it most. The people who stay consistent don't rely on it at all. Here's what they do instead. They stop treating motivation like fuel. Because it isn't fuel. It's weather. It shows up, it disappears, and it never asks your permission. If your entire plan depends on how you feel in the morning, you've already lost. The consistent ones figured something out early. They built a system that works on the days they feel like nothing. A system that doesn't argue with your mood. A system that quietly moves you forward while your brain is still deciding whether it wants to. That's what this video is about. And once you see how it works in the brain, you can't unsee it. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. Motivation is essentially a dopamine spike, a burst of anticipation your brain gives you when it senses a possible reward. It feels like energy, but it's really just a chemical prediction, and predictions expire fast. That's why the excitement you feel on day 1 is almost gone by day 4. Your brain isn't broken. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is stop wasting energy on rewards it now considers familiar. So if you're waiting to feel motivated again before you take action, you're waiting for a chemical event your brain has already decided isn't a priority. The consistent people bypass this entirely. They stop chasing a spike and start engineering something the brain values far more, which is a stable habit loop. A habit loop has 3 parts: a cue, a behavior, and a reward, repeated until the brain stops asking questions. Once the loop is set, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that debates and decides, quietly hands the wheel to your basal ganglia, the part that runs things automatically. That handoff is the goal, because once a behavior becomes automatic, it no longer needs motivation to survive. This is why consistent people look disciplined from the outside but feel almost neutral on the inside. They're not grinding through willpower, they're following a groove their brain has already carved. And here's the interesting part. That groove is built faster than you think, if you know what to do. The first thing they do is shrink the behavior until it's almost embarrassing. Not a workout, but putting on the shoes. Not writing a chapter, but opening the document. Not a full clean, but wiping one counter. The brain resists big changes because big changes trigger the amygdala, the threat detection center, which reads effort as danger and floods you with hesitation. Tiny actions slip under that radar. They're too small to scare you and too small to skip. And every time you complete one, your brain releases a small hit of dopamine, not for the size of the act, but for the completion of it. That completion signal is what wires the loop. So they're not doing less. They're building the neural circuit first, then scaling the behavior on top of it. The second thing they do is anchor the new behavior to something that already exists. Your brain loves patterns. It uses cues to trigger routines without your permission, which is why you reach for your phone the second you sit down, or crave sugar at the exact same time each afternoon. Consistent people hijack this. They stack the new habit onto an old one, so the old cue does the heavy lifting. After I pour my coffee, I write 1 sentence. After I brush my teeth, I stretch for 60 seconds. After I close my laptop, I walk for 10 minutes. The existing habit becomes the starter engine. You don't need motivation, you just need the trigger to fire. Neuroscience has a name for this kind of pairing. It's called associative learning, and it's one of the oldest, most reliable systems in the human brain. The third thing they do is protect the identity, not the outcome. This is the shift most people miss. When your goal is an outcome like losing weight or finishing a project, your brain treats every setback as failure, and failure kills the loop. But when your goal is an identity, like being someone who moves their body every day, or someone who writes even when it's ugly, a bad day doesn't break a story. It just becomes one small scene inside a bigger one. Your brain is constantly scanning for evidence of who you are. Every time you do the small action, even badly, you're feeding it proof. And the prefrontal cortex uses that proof to update your self-concept, which then quietly changes what feels natural to do next. This is why identity-based consistency compounds. You're not fighting your brain anymore. You're feeding it a story it wants to keep confirming. Now here's the piece almost nobody warns you about. There will be a stretch, usually somewhere between week 2 and week 4, where the behavior stops feeling exciting but hasn't quite become automatic yet. That gap is where most people quit. Consistent people expect this gap. They don't interpret the boredom as a signal to stop. They interpret it as a signal that the loop is forming. Because boredom, in this context, is a good sign, it means the dopamine spike is fading and the habit is being handed over to the automatic system. You're not losing motivation. You're graduating past needing it. If you can sit inside that boredom for another week or two without renegotiating the plan, the behavior locks in. And once it locks in, it costs almost nothing to maintain. The fourth thing they do is make the environment quietly do the work. Your brain uses roughly 40% less energy when the right cue is already in front of you. If your running shoes are by the door, you run more. If your phone is in another room, you focus more. If the junk food isn't in the house, it isn't a decision anymore. Consistent people don't rely on willpower because they've reduced how often willpower even needs to show up. They shape the room, so the room shapes them. This is one of the most underrated forms of self-respect, designing a space where your future self doesn't have to be a hero just to do the basics. The fifth thing they do is redefine what a good day looks like. For most people, a good day means a big day. High energy, big output, everything checked off. That standard is fragile because most days aren't like that and your brain punishes you for missing an unrealistic bar. Consistent people lower the bar to something almost impossible to fail. On a great day, they do the full thing. On a hard day, they do the smallest version. On a terrible day, they still touch the habit for 1 minute. That 1 minute is not weakness. That 1 minute is what keeps the neural pathway alive when everything else is falling apart. Miss a day and you're fine. Miss a week and the loop starts to fade. Neuroscience calls this maintenance, and it's the quiet reason some people can bounce back from setbacks in days, while others take months. Notice something about all 5 of these. None of them require you to feel a certain way. None of them ask you to summon energy from nowhere. None of them depend on a mood. That's the shift. Consistency isn't a feeling you chase. It's a structure you build, one small, boring, unglamorous decision at a time, until the structure carries you on the days you can't carry yourself. And here's what happens on the other side of that structure. Your baseline changes. Things that used to feel impossible feel ordinary. Things that used to require a pep talk now happen before you've even finished your coffee. You stop being someone who's trying to become disciplined and start being someone who quietly is. That's the real payoff. Not a highlight reel, but a life that runs on rails you built yourself. So if you take one thing from this, let it be this. Stop waiting to feel ready. Readiness is a chemical you can't schedule. Systems are something you can. Start smaller than you think you should. Attach it to something you already do. Feed the identity, not the outcome. Sit through the boring middle. Let the room help you, and on the worst days, do the 1-minute version and call it a win, because it is. Somewhere in this list is the one thing you already know you've been avoiding. Tell me in the comments which one you're going to start with, because naming it out loud is part of how the brain commits to it. If this reframed how you think about discipline, you'll probably get even more out of the next one on how your daily habits quietly reshape the brain's reward system over time. And if you want a calm, practical breakdown of how the brain actually works, minus the hype, subscribe and turn on notifications. New brain-based habits every week, built for real life, not the highlight reel. Motivation was never the engine. You are.